So tansik tatamskat nogakio. My name is Lea Bill, and I'm the Executive Director for Alberta First Nations Information Governance Centre. And we're here just to share some of the successes and the work that we've been doing for the past few years within Alberta and also with our national and international partners, particularly in the research area and the data, information, and governance work. I originally come from Treaty 6 territory in the Saskatchewan side, but have lived in Alberta since the early 90s. Some of you know who I am, and I send out my greetings to all of you in Alberta, all of the different nations that are within Alberta and across the country. Some of the really exciting pieces of work that we've been doing, of course, has been in cancer research, and particularly around prevention and screening. The other areas that have really met a lot of excitement, I guess, is the work that we've been doing on emergency department and equity work and anti-racism. The other piece of work that we've been doing is the murdered and missing Indigenous women and looking at ways that stories can be relayed back and can generate data that's useful for this particular interest group. As a regional information governance center, it's really been an important part of the organization's work to increase knowledge and awareness of data governance, data stewardship, and in particular data sovereignty. As a mandated organization by the Chiefs of Alberta, this is one of their really high priority areas and has been for since 2010 when the organization was originally incorporated. And we've made significant strides in this area, of course, particularly around increasing understanding of what data sovereignty means, the preparation that's required to ensure that we do a good job in moving in that direction. Now with the injection of funds by the federal government to implement a national data strategy specific for First Nations, it allows us as a regional information governance center to really begin to explore and do some very specific capacity building with our nations, as well as build an infrastructure that will actually support all nations within Alberta around working towards data sovereignty. Originally, of course, the Alberta Information Governance Center, their primary role was to deploy the regional health survey. This was a survey that was carried out by StatsCan, and then it moved over to be carried out by our national organization, the FNIGC, which then deployed it to regions to do the actual data collection. And so Alberta itself has been deploying that regional health survey since the early 2000s. And at the moment, we're in the midst of the regional health survey 4 deployment. And Alberta is proud to say that we have 23 nations that have signed BCRs to begin the data collection. And we're quite pleased with that, particularly because some nations that have never participated are now participating in this study. And that information and data will actually allow them to begin to do their own planning around specific areas of interest. The survey itself has a number of very specific interest areas for nations because they have included some questions of their own in that study. So we're quite happy about that. AFNIGC has been implementing OCAP. OCAP has been a very critical component, particularly for the data that we are in partnership with collecting. So with our partners, the ownership access, control, and possession principles have allowed us to generate and create data sharing agreements that actually outline how that data must be managed and stewarded by our partners, particularly academic institutions and or other partners. For our nations, OCAP is really important because then it allows them to have something to begin working with any partners that they may wish to engage with around data. Those principles, while you can't hold people to them, at least it's a beginning and a starting point. But what must also be part of that is the data sharing agreements, which really strictly outlines where the data will be stored, how it'll be stewarded, and specifically outlines the ownership piece, where you can legally define what that is. So each one of those concepts, ownership, control, access, and possession, can be defined legally by each specific nation, however way they choose when it comes to the data and time. And our job here at AFNIGC is to make sure that all partners understand and know that there are principles that we must all operate by. The resources on our website help to further define and articulate how OCAP principles can be employed or utilized within any agreement. So I want to talk a little bit more about the research program that we have. The research program at Alberta Information Governance Centre has been the process, or it has been the program that has really allowed us to remain sustainable or alive, as we don't get consistent core funding that would actually enable the organization to function in the way it has been. And so it's always been through grants and the research program that we've been able to stay alive and do a lot of the work that we've done with nations. And in particular, we've done extensive work under the topic of cancer. The first project that was done was doing the needs assessment around cancer specific, and of course things have exploded and grown from there. After that needs assessment, we then did a major 3-year project where we worked with 3 nations to look at the quality of care for First Nations in cancer. And that was part of the Pathways project. And it was the Treaty 6 chiefs that really pushed us to look at prevention and screening, because they felt that that was really critical and important to look at. And as a result of that, we were able to get partnerships in place with Alberta Health Services, where we have done now a 6-year project on prevention and screening in 2 phases. And we're quite proud to say that there's been a lot of resources developed. There's been 6 communities that have created their own cancer prevention and screening strategies. And we're now implementing a learning management system that will enable us to teach other communities and leaders within communities to implement that whole process that we underwent with those 6 initial communities. Our partnership with the Canadian Partnership Against Cancer has been amazing. They're an incredible organization who really have believed in us. We did a massive environmental scan on data and research specifically to under the auspices or the topic of cancer. And so that particular report now is being presented in an illustrative video under the direction of elder knowledge holders who said we needed to start sharing our information more in an oral fashion, and particularly reports, so it would meet some of the needs of those folks that don't read a lot. And So that is in the process of being released. The other area of under the cancer work is we now are in the process of working on a data dashboard for prevention and screening data. And again, that's a significant agreement with Screening Alberta and Dr. Huming. The other piece was the under the prevention and screening was our HPV, particularly around knowledge mobilization. We had done an initial project with the University of Calgary around doing a systematic review, and we now are beginning to work on the knowledge translation piece of that, which is working with Six Nations again on improving the uptake of the vaccine itself for prevention purposes. And it's quite timely now as the new release of information around higher incidences of cervical cancer, and HPV is one of those preventative measures that can reduce cervical cancer rates. The other piece that we've done extensive work on is the anti-racism and emergency care and quality of care at emergency. And I'm sure many of you have heard a lot of the excitement around the work that we've done there. We have launched some newer products, but there's also the publications. They've really increased a lot of awareness and knowledge. More recently, we released a publication on the patients leaving the emergency without being seen. So we believe that we're making impact and making people become more aware, really, of the inequities that are tied directly to racism as a whole. Part of the work around the anti-Indigenous racism is the simulation project that we have in partnership with Dr. McLean and the University of Alberta. And that particular project is looking at simulations of events where racism might have taken place, and then using those recorded and taped sessions to help train healthcare providers like physicians, nurses, and or emergency care providers in looking at their own biases and addressing some of those unconscious biases that come forward whenever you are encountering First Nations people in an emergency care scenario. So one of the other areas we've been working very hard at, and I believe many of you might have seen our health status report, and that was a first of its kind in Canada for our health status report to be put in a format so that people could actually access it digitally and then create their own reports from there. It's been really well utilized. We get a lot of hits on that in terms of folks wanting to access their own data and print out or utilize that information for their own program planning. There's two other projects that I haven't spoken about, and that's we have an international partnership with Australia working on children aging out of care. And this particular project focuses on the mental health of youth aging out of care, and it's specifically directed for children, and we've partnered with the Calgary Friendship Centre on this because majority of these youth end up in an urban setting as opposed to in an on-reserve setting. So it's one of the projects that we're focused on children that are off-reserve. And the hope with that project is that at the end of the 6-year program is we'll be able to have some tools and resources in place that will help support these young people as they age out of care. And the target population that will be selected will be provided opportunities to learn about culture and perhaps some of those gaps in knowledge that they have as a result of being in care for an extended period of time. So we do have knowledge holders who are very traditional based that are part of that project, and we'll be actually teaching and training these young people on the cultures that they respectively are associated with. And Australia has done some very extensive work on identifying indicators specifically with their youth, and our hope is that we'll be able to utilize that as a basis or a grounding to identify specific indicators for our youth here in Canada, Indigenous youth. The other project is the I-HeLTI project, which is the Indigenous component of healthy life trajectories. This project is another longitudinal study. We initially had done some groundwork with a 2-year project, but now that's expanded into we were successful in partnering with the New Chalneth. I'm a co-PI on the research project, and our partners are the Simon Fraser University, along with the University of Alberta, and then the 2 communities in Alberta that are part of that project are Musqueam and the Wood Buffalo area. So this work is also exciting because it's about restoring healthy family systems and really looking at some of the components that affect the long-term health. These are non-communicable diseases, so things like diabetes, heart disease, arthritis. So by understanding some of the elements that are affecting maternal and child health, even prior to conception, right through the whole conception phase, and then children as they're born and grow, it'll enable communities to perhaps maybe start developing programming, which is already happening as the project moves along. For example, in Musqueam, one of the areas they identified was the absence of fathers in that really critical, important phase of during the fathering, but also the parenting phase and even the birthing phase. And so they actually developed a program called Deadly Dads, where now fathers are very much engaged in parenting, but also in that whole process of pregnancy with their partners. One of the important things is we've included, or we've always, right from the very get-go with any of our research projects, is the inclusion of elder knowledge holders, because a lot of the knowledge and our ways of knowing and doing things has been absent in research as a whole. And Alberta FNIGC from the very beginning really felt that that was a critical part of the work that we do, and that's what we're well known for, I believe anyway, is, and that's what makes a difference and an impact as far as our research is concerned. Maybe one of the key messages I want to send out to everybody is that as an organization, we have the best interest of our nations at heart, and entrench, I guess, our work in believing that our knowledge, our way of doing things, and in particular, the knowledge of our elders is really important to be included in all of our work. The other thing is strengthening our whole position around the right to treaty and our treaty rights. That's also something that our knowledge holders have really strongly advised us never to forget that. Because if you forget about the important original agreements that we have, then it diminishes some of our strength in some regards. It diminishes also our ability to negotiate and to hold on to what's rightfully ours.